That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Well, I want to say good evening to everybody, and I am very happy to be joining you all tonight on this platform. Um, I'm a retired physician. I practice internal medicine in the city and in the western suburban areas for about 40 years. I retired from clinical practice in 2017, sorry, 2019. However, I'm still interested and I'm still trying to heal the community in those ways that I can without really writing prescriptions, but teaching and mentoring and helping to get give people the knowledge and information that they need that they can have a healthier body and a happier life. So we're here tonight, hope to joining our colleagues to learn and to teach. So we're happy to be aboard and happy to do what we can to answer whatever question that we can answer.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to that urologist extraordinaire who hates accolades, but he's the man. You can listen to him every Sunday when they say the statement, "Is there a doctor in the house?" That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason?
Thank you, Nikki, and I want to thank you and the congressman for creating this forum for us. I'm grateful to be here. I'm a retired urologist, practiced urology about 25 years in the city, and then did a stint of different areas in government work, serving as the commissioner of health for the city of Chicago and both chief operating officer and the chief executive officer for Cook County. So it's given me an opportunity to see things from many different vantage points, and I'm grateful to be here and share what I can with you.
Thank you so very much. Well, to that one who's known as Dr. 100 on these streets, to the one who keeps it A-OK. She's always going to give you the honest heart to God truth, but she's here to make sure that you are healthy. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Dr. Maya Green, also known as Dr. 100, because I like to keep it 100. I just want to wish everybody a happy. Today is the National Day of Transgender Remembrance, or National Transgender Day of Remembrance, honoring all of our siblings who identify as transgender. And, you know, what better way to do that than to spend time with tribe and community? I'm happy to learn from the community and happy to learn from my esteemed colleagues here. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman, for making this forum.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to the man who says that he is really the Wolfgang Puck of healthcare. He is that family medicine doctor, but he's also a weight loss guru. That's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton?
Thank you, Nikki. And don't call me an infectious disease doctor just yet, but I'm working on it. So I appreciate being here. Family and obesity doctor, really focused on healing the community with wellness and nutrition, and really just any opportunity to stand before you guys and share what I have learned and can share to help heal the community is what I love doing. And even on a late night after being in clinic all day, seeing 28 patients, still having time to be with you guys is a passion of mine. And I appreciate the opportunity, Nikki. So let's do it.
All right. Thank you so very much to our special guest, which isn't just a guest, but she is so special. She's been here before and she shares great information. And that's our very own Mapilla. Mapilla, why don't you tell us about yourself and your foundation?
I'm so excited to be joining you guys again. I am not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. But I'm so excited to be here. My name is Mapilla Don, and I am a national sickle cell advocate. I am the founder of the MTS Sickle Cell Foundation. We are passionate about raising awareness, support, and sensitivity surrounding sickle cell disease. I have 3 daughters who all have sickle cell disease, so that is my reason for doing what I do in this space. And again, I'm just so honored to be with all of you again.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. Well, while we're waiting on the congressman to get here, because he wanted to actually share this special announcement with you, that as of October 26th, a company called Vertex geared up to launch a sickle cell therapy because we are so close to having a cure. We have our doctors here today and our interns go over what sickle cell is, how it affects the body, things that sickle cell does, and how patients actually suffer. And then we have Mapilla who can talk about some of the trials and tribulations that she has been through, but she has been such a stellar advocate for sickle cell and also working along with Vertex. Then we can share some of the great things that Vertex has doing. We are looking for this great launch that they have within the next, I think it's like 28 to 30 days. And this treatment is going to be approved for any patient that is 12 years or older. So let's get into sickle cell and really talk about what it is. Dr. Miller, as an internist who probably saw many patients who suffered from sickle cell, what did you see?
Dr. Miller, you're muted.
Dr. Miller, unmute yourself.
So sickle cell disease is a disease affecting the red blood cells of our bodies. We all have red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. So it affects the red blood cells, and because it causes the cells to actually sickle, which means they change their shape. Normally they are oval shape, and when they become sickle, the cells then clump together, and that create a problem with the flow of the blood within the vessels. And when blood doesn't flow well, it creates something called ischemia. And ischemia means that we don't get adequate blood supply or blood flow, and it also causes the blood to become, I would say, I'll call it thickened, which is again affecting the flow of the blood. And this process is associated with severe pain in those people that suffer from this problem. Uh, and so, over my 40 years of practice, I saw a lot of patients with sickle cell disease. And by the time that I obviously retired, we had no real cure. There were treatments that we have done over that period of time to try to relieve the pain and try to stop the sickling process. And just the fact that there is something now on the horizon that's going to change that is obviously a great occurrence. Will be a great occurrence. And we've many patients that have suffered from this. It is a disease that is more prevalent in Black people, and therefore, it has again, it caused some acute problems, which is mainly pain, but over the period of time, it causes other chronic changes, which those changes when blood doesn't circulate and flow the way that it should, which is changes like developing ischemic changes, which cause the individual to develop sores and other kinds of things that can get infected and just create a difficult uh, clinical condition for that patient and affect their ability to have to function during the periods when they're during those crises the painful crisis. So so has been a devastating disease for a number of years, and if we can see some ending to that process, something that's going to relieve that process, man, that is that would be great.
You're muted, Nikki. Yeah, there you go.
I try to mute because sometimes you get a lot of background noises, so I try to mute when I'm not. So thank you so very much, Dr. Miller. A question has arrived in our confidential chat that says, when a cell, well, let me go into the beginning of the person's statement. They gave a statement first. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for the education. You stated that it turns from being round to being a sickle. What does a sickle look like, and why does it change?
So normal cells are, like I said, an oval shape. So when these cells become sickle, they develop what we call a spherical, more instead of being rounded, it become somewhat elongated, and so that in itself create part of the problem with the flow. But it is more than just the sickling of the cell, but it create again increase thickening within the blood, and so affect the flow of the blood through the vessel. But the shape changed from a round or oval shape to somewhat of an oblong kind of shape.
All right, outstanding. Well, Tony, I see that
Yeah.
you are geared up. Come on.
You're funny. Okay. So what, I was watching a squirrel, actually a rabbit in my backyard, when in the summer, and they go from your yard to the next yard, and I'm like, how did he get under the fence, right? And they're able to kind of get in there, and I don't know how they do it, but that's kind of what a normal blood cell can do. And when you have sickle cells, they just can't do it. They get stuck, and when they get stuck, they wreak havoc on your body. And so imagine you have all these blood vessels in like everywhere in your body. The only place you don't have blood vessels is the cornea of your eye, because it breathes through the air. Your hair, the top layer of your skin, maybe the enamel of your teeth, your nails, everywhere else you have blood vessels. So all of these parts of your body have to allow blood to transfer through it. And the hemoglobin is what the oxygen is being carried in. So imagine what is that going to make you feel like if you can't get that hemoglobin travel through? You're gonna be tired. And if it gets into your joints, it's going to cause a ton of pain. And that pain is not just in your joints. I remember when I was at West Suburban Hospital in Oak Park, you knew these patients very well because they were always in the hospital, like every month, every other week, and they were in there to be treated for their pain symptoms. They would come in with abdominal pain. They would have visual issues. And so it was really a devastating disease, particularly because of that. If you imagine the blood vessels can't travel through, the hemoglobin can't travel properly, your risk for a stroke is higher. Your risk for a seizure is higher. And so it was really fairly devastating for the families. And as my colleague has suggested, the treatment was, a lot of pain management, a lot of hydration, and things of that nature. And it just wasn't really ideal. And then, more recently, the treatment started to improve. And I know we're going to talk about some advances, but conventional medicine has really not served us well. One of the things that we do nowadays is, we do bone marrow transplants. So if a person comes in and we can get some bone marrow from a match, that's a good treatment. The problem is maybe 1 out of 4 of these siblings who we're trying to match are actually going to be a match. So you have to kind of win the lottery with that. And then we have a medicine called hydroxyurea that some patients get, and that increases the production of a form of hemoglobin that helps prevent red cells from becoming sickled. So we have treatment out there, but I don't think we've ever had a conversation around possibly curing it other than the bone marrow conversation, and you have to get lucky. So if we can come up with a treatment where we can allow everybody, and no matter if their family has it or not, or our matches, that would be an ideal state. And when you think about the people who are affected, sub-Saharan Africa, people in America, African American descent, it has a devastating effect. And literally people who are thinking about getting married need to make sure their partner, do you have a sickle cell trait or not? Because if you got 2 people with the trait, then you got about a 1 in 4 chance of the babies getting sickle cell. And the trait is not so bad, but the disease, as our guest would attest to, can be pretty devastating. So I'm really excited about us being able to talk about the advances, because if you have taken care of a patient with this, it can be pretty devastating. I can't remember what the life expectancy is, but it's not normal. And I think hydroxyurea and these advances have helped, but it's still not at the level it should be. So I'm really excited that we can maybe one day normalize the life expectancy for people with sickle cell.
All right. Well, Maya, it looks like you had something to say too. I don't want to leave anybody out.
No, I think the doctor said it. The doctors that have spoken said it very comprehensively. The only thing I would think about adding, so sickle cell affects 1 in every 365 African American babies, there's no way you don't like get sickle cell while you're living. You inherit it. So if you have sickle cell, you were born with it. There's no way to kind of catch it or things like that. And typically people won't see symptoms. People don't indicate any pain to about the 6th month of life. And how do you know you have it? They're screening. So typically, when you're getting your care, when you're in the parent's belly, they're screening, and they're screening after. That can be done. The screening at newborn, if not done before, they screen you for it, and then they'll let your parent know, or let your family know. I'm a visual person, so I have my little, let's see if I can get it. If this is a cell floating, you all know, I mean, it's more, it has a lot to do with the overall charge, electrons, protons, whatever you want to call it, on things, and the makeup of the proteins within the cell and how they're attracted. But essentially they form this kind of dome, right? The simplest way for me to think about it is when you put one drop of water on a table, that drop of water holds to itself. But if you mess around and mess up that drop, so it's not this like circle drop, and put another one near it, it joins together, right? So here's it's really a circle, but look at it. I mean, it's really like a disc. So one, it's not this long, but let's just look at it. And then the difference when it sickles is something triggers it, and it gets into the smaller blood vessel. So if I'm here, I'm going through the big blood vessels, I'm not having any problems. But then I get triggered, I get a sickle, and it forms like this. Sometimes I like for added dramatization, I like to make these little corners here. Now imagine this going through, scraping the vessels, scraping the heart, scraping the joints, things like that. Now, I'm talking millions of them. I'm not talking about one cell. This is one cell. Millions at one time causes a lot of pain for people who experience it. So what do? They stay hydrated, exercise so that their blood vessels dilate more and things like that, is used to it. And then my patients, they had to mainly try to stay out of cold temperatures, or things that for them individually will send them into pain, or what we call it, crisis, sickle cell crisis. That's all I would add. Thank you.
Dr. Mason?
Well, the only thing I was just thinking about is that, in addition to what my colleagues have already said, that when these cells change into this shape, they oftentimes can cause blockage and can cause the blood to flow to actually slow down a bit, making the condition even more adverse. We saw this in urology, especially men would end up with this problem, and it could cause sexual dysfunction for the men who had this, and it also was painful. And I think that we can't underestimate the discomfort that this disease causes. And it doesn't matter whether you're a teenager or an adult or what have you. The pain is real, and it's there. And and what happens is, because these cells, as my colleagues have said, sickle, they end up blocking up the channel sometimes in certain parts of the vascular tree. I mean, it stops the blood from moving freely, and that creates additional problems. And it could cause problems with spleens. It could cause problems with other organs in the body that people who have this disease, or parents who have children that have this disease, or even young adults themselves know all too well from the times that they had to spend so much time in the hospitals. And I'll end by saying that we had to be careful, because it's very painful, and you have to balance the pain medication so that you don't actually addict somebody, but give them enough so that they can have the kind of pain relief that's necessary. And perhaps some of my colleagues who've done more of this more recently than I have can speak on this, or maybe Mom, because she's obviously had to deal with this for some time.
Yeah, I just can add just couple other things that Dr. Mason talked about, how as the cell gets cause damage to the vessel. The spleen is one of the organs that does get damaged and often times get destroyed. Now, the spleen is an important organ that has to, especially when we're talking about pneumococcal pneumonia, that help in terms of providing the antibiotics that's necessary to combat that. So, without a spleen, which is what the individual that suffer from having an autosplenectomy, or we call it autosplenectomy, when there's damage that occurs that destroys the spleen. Now they have to deal with the things lacking the things that the spleen doesn't provide. And also, there's a whole number of, as was mentioned, of things that can trigger a sickling crisis, infections, and uh, a number of other things. And there's nothing that the individual can do to stop or to control when these processes are going to occur. And so it is it is a situation where it obviously going to affect one's quality of life. I mean, if you're working, if you're in school, there's going to be a lot of days that you're just not going to be able to do what you normally would be able to do when you're in crisis. And so it has a tremendous effect on quality of life.
I'll add this real quick. I want to kind of comment on, we're pretty holistic in how we think about how you take care of yourself. And what I found in my patients who had it, now unfortunately a lot of these patients, I'm taking care of adults now, and they were mostly kids. And what does a kid do when you're trying to tell them take better care of yourself, right? What does that look like? And for me, it looks like, to the extent you can control it, you're going to try to live a life you're going to reduce your stress, right? So if kids or adults who have very stressful lives, they're going to have more frequent sickle cell episodes. That's fairly obvious. And talk to a kid that likes to get enough sleep, right? You find one, I want to meet them, right? Kids they want to stay up all night, playing video games and things like that. I'm going to bow down to our guest because I'm sure she's dealt with them not wanting to get rest. But honestly, you got to get rest if you want to reduce the number of flares that you have. So, and again, another thing my mom taught me very well, she taught me about drinking water, right? And my mom, I thought, I didn't know what was going on. She was a water drinker. So I had to become a water drinker. I tend to put a little lemon in my water to help me drink water. But mom was right. If you're not hydrated, because your arteries are just like pipes, right? So if you put more fluid in those pipes, then maybe things will travel through them a little easier. So I just think that, I hate when we have, limitations on what we can do. We do want to focus on some of the stuff we can do. And in my opinion, that's why I have a nest, right? Nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep. All of those things are going to help us to reduce something that's very difficult to deal with. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix.
Outstanding. Well, Connie Taylor is here and she says good evening to everyone. Jackie Robinson is here and she says good evening. Tamika Thomas is here. She says good evening, everyone, and hey to Uncle Terry. Dr. Lolita Travis is here and she has a great question. Dr. Travis asks, does this condition cause memory loss?
Can I take that on?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily that it causes memory loss. And of course, I want to start off by saying sickle cell affects everyone differently. Even with my 3 daughters, who same mom, same dad, same genotype, it manifests differently among all 3 of them. Where sickle cell may cause memory loss comes into the fact that sickle cell is the leading cause of stroke, especially in children. And oftentimes, it's not necessarily going to be an obvious stroke where you can tell that a person has experienced a stroke. It could be silent. And when these occurrences happen, it does leave an impact. It could be IQ points that are lost. It could be you're starting to exhibit neurocognitive issues. And so for my youngest daughter, even though she's never had an obvious stroke, She doesn't. She's 14, never had a pain crisis, but for her, her struggle with sickle cell is more so neurocognitive, and she is. We just found out in December she is high risk of stroke, and so all those happenings in her brain. There's when you look at her MRI, you see like chunks of her vessels that have literally disappeared. So in instances like that, one of the ways that sickle cell manifests for her is that she really doesn't retain much. So she struggles in school like tremendously.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I am happy that Vertex has what they have and what we're
Yeah.
doing and the strives that we has done. You know, Nellie Purnell is here and she says good evening to everyone that's here. And she says Garrison is here and she says good evening. Connor Purdue says hi to Dr. Hampton. And then we have another person who's here, Jodina, who says, I'm recovering from a stroke as we speak. Well, we'll be praying, and then we know that you can get through it. Trust and believe that you definitely can. Well, Dr. Graham, your thoughts. Why don't you share your thoughts with us on sickle cell and how it could affect patients who also suffer from arthritis? Or could it
Well,
cause?
but yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have the misfortune of having both. And the part that I remember when I was going through my training was we'd have some come in with some very, very serious bone pain because when those blood vessels can't circulate in and out of the bones, especially the long bones, it's really, really uncomfortable. It's a lot of pain, required hydration, oxygen, and medications. And I must say, I'm hoping that right around the corner that we're going to have some kind of genetic way to approach this because medications themselves weren't able to really stop the progression of what was happening. And to me, my heart goes out to your daughter because I can't imagine how you can be with your friends in school and progress the way that they do when you don't have the same things that they do.
Um, Thank you so much, Dr. Graham. And also, just to elaborate on that, my 19-year-old, she's currently in college. She had to take this semester off because she developed a vascular necrosis in her left hip. So she had to have her hip replaced in September, and that led to its own little challenges. But that is something else that happens with sickle cell. Over time, the bones can deteriorate.
So just to help everybody, avascular necrosis is when the head of the hip doesn't get enough blood supply. And you need that blood supply to feed that bone. So it's not getting oxygen, it's not getting any nutrients. Like any other plant, when you don't get what you need, that bone collapses and dies. It is very, very painful. So that's kind of how I think about avascular necrosis.
Oh wow. Mapilla, can you walk us through a day of, or walk us through a sickle cell crisis?
Oh, wow. From a caregiver's perspective, I mean, they're all so different. And I think also what is good to keep in mind is that a crisis can happen anywhere. And sometimes we're going through certain crises and we're not even thinking sickle cell. My daughter had a crisis in her face, and we were thinking it was like a dental issue that was happening, but it was a sickle cell crisis. Or in her arm, in her back, it can occur anywhere. Typically, what has to happen, there are some crises where she feels like she can handle it at home because we have home meds, and we will start there. But once it escalates to a place where she feels like, okay, mommy, I got to go in. And for her, typically, her intense crises lead to uh, acute chest syndrome, and that's a blockage of the blood flow in the lungs. So we get to the hospital. She has to be on some really hard narcotics. And sadly, children as young as, I mean, babies are having to have these narcotics because the pain is that severe. Typically, we're there maybe anywhere from a couple of days to a week or a little over a week. Um, Not in school, missing so much, and having to come back from school and do that catch up. praying that you don't have to go back, because sometimes, you never know how a crisis may happen. You may think you're good to go, they discharge you, and you have to go back. We just had a situation after her surgery. She developed a pulmonary embolism, and we were in and out of the hospital for like a whole month. So not all crises are the same. So it's hard to really just kind of paint a picture for you, but it's very painful. And it's one of those things where it halts her life and it halts my life, because I'm there with her.
Well, I think you answered the question greatly, because you explained that it's not just something typical that people are looking for. They're looking for people just to, say, oh, well, my tummy hurts or something. But you said she had a crisis in her face. You thought it was a dental issue. There's been a time she's had a crisis in her arm. I mean, there's the crisis that happened with the hip, and which led to a actual hip replacement for such a young person. So yeah, I mean, oh no, go ahead.
No, a lot. What she's still in the pediatric setting, but this surgery had to happen at an adult hospital, and a lot of the nurses were like, "Oh my gosh, you're my youngest patient." They're so used to, older folks having these surgeries, but yeah.
So no, you answered the question greatly. We do have a question from our great friends over at the Core Center who are working. They just wanted to send a question over for everybody to answer. And their question is, what could bring on a crisis? Are there triggers? All of you don't jump at that question at the same time. There's enough space for it to go around.
It's different for everybody. It's different.
What I remember about this from my training was illnesses are great triggers. Anytime that you're affecting the delivery of oxygen, which affects the red blood cells, if you have a flu, if you have a pneumonia, if you have an infection, this all changes the demand for oxygen in your bodies and can force those red blood cells to change from round to the other figure. So that was one of the things that I could remember from my training.
Okay, Maya. Dr. You got some thoughts on what could be some triggers?
Sure. I think we mentioned some before. For my patients, I've seen a lot of the cold weather triggering it. Things like high altitude, physical labor. I think Dr. Graham mentioned infection. For everybody, it is different. I thought, and forgive me for if I thought Mrs. Dawn was going to take that one. That's why I was so quiet, because I think I love, the way it's what the experience of triggering looks like in the home. I think gives people a better picture of what they should, think. Because I'm like, high altitudes, cold weather, things like that. But when it's real 100, right?
I appreciate
Maurice for being quiet, because I was like, this is, you're the expert in this area.
So I've of 3 of my kids, only one has crises. So it's just, for her, stress is a trigger. The cold weather can bring on a crisis, but you can't tell that girl that. She loves the cold, and I keep telling her it's not about what you love, it's what your body is telling you that it does not love. But I think for the most part, her trigger is stress. And then sometimes you have those moments where it just comes on. You don't know what the trigger is.
Okay.
Well, I got a question for you.
Dehydration. When you're dehydrated, that is a good trigger.
A question I had was, kids they like to be kids, and they think they're invincible, and they can do almost anything, anytime, anywhere. And I wanted to know, how do you help your child adjust to a different kind of reality, if I could say it that way?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, because we dealt with that a lot. They wanted to do. There was this one year they wanted to do step, like you guys know what step is, right? Um, right. And so I was scared for them, but they had friends in high school who were joining the step team and they wanted to do that. And so what I had to do, and that was my first time allowing them to do anything physical. Um, for me, that was when I decided to let go and let God, but at the same time, let everyone around them, the coaches, and I do that anyway, just letting people who are going to be around them in terms of teachers or in this case coaches know what sickle cell disease is, to ensure that they themselves are helping them stay hydrated, to make sure that they're taking breaks and different things like that, and just telling them to make sure they're listening to their bodies, because at the end of the day they have to learn these things. They have to learn their limitations, not necessarily that we're putting limitations on them, but listening to your body as far as what is going to trigger you to have an episode, or what's going to make you feel like, okay, I may need to take a break and not overdo it because I'm going to end up in the hospital. So also they weren't outside of step. They really did not, try to be active that much, except for my middle daughter who just went to college this semester. Her senior year, she just decided to like do so much, and I was like, she wanted to play soccer, she wanted to play volleyball, and I just saw it as like something it seemed like something she was going through, where she was, trying to see what she was made of. Because, I mean, she's never had a pain crisis, but she had a stroke when she was in the second grade. And so, like, since then, she's been doing monthly blood transfusions. I never saw her as a sports type of person. But her senior year, she wanted to try everything. And she did really well. She was, she hung in there. She was very active, did not go into a crisis, because that was one of my fears. She's never had a pain crisis. Is this what's going to trigger her? But, she tried it and she was able to excel in, these new things that she was trying. So I've always just taken that role of, not pushing them, but at the same time, always leading with education, whether it's them or the people around them. Because one of my philosophies is, trying to build a village around my kids so that I'm not the only one looking out for certain things.
That's right. And then just for to move into what you were talking about, there are two types of stepping, right? There's a Chicago step, a little two step, that you can step to come get to this by Marvin Gaye. And then there's the stepping that originated in West Africa, where you use your body and your to dance, but those dances make coordinated sounds.
That's the
almost
one.
like a drummer. A lot of HBCUs, a lot of fraternities and sororities do it. They do it at HBCUs. They do it better at Alabama A&M than Xavier, but Dr. Tony would, yeah, yeah.
And they were really good. Their team won regional, state, and national. They got to step for the governor. I mean, it was a great experience, but I'm not gonna lie, I was really nervous.
Now, what school are they at, Mapiller?
Well, at the time, they were at Lovejoy High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for sharing, because they hadn't gotten to well, I'm not going to repeat those school names, but they hadn't got there yet, who someone thinks that may be the best. I mean, but it's okay. Dr. Miller, Jodina stated that low iron can actually trigger as well. Why don't you talk about what iron is really quickly, and what low iron or what that can trigger?
Yeah. So as we go back, let me just sort of explain the red blood cells. One of the major function is that the hemoglobin carries oxygen. Our bodies need oxygen. All the tissue need oxygen, and when it doesn't get it, then there are consequences, and usually they're not good. the consequences that it can even, if you're not able to build up the needed level of oxygen in your blood, I mean, it can be life-threatening and even cause death. So iron is important in building hemoglobin. It is so when if you have a deficiency of iron, so you can end up having two things that causing you to be anemic. One, if you're sicklers are anemic because they have a problem with manufacturing or producing cells that are adequate. So they're anemic to start with. And if you happen to have a deficiency of iron, that in itself also can cause anemia. And so if you got both of these things and your oxygen carrying capacity, you have a double effect on your oxygen carrying capacity. So more anemic that you are, if you get a hemoglobin, in normal people, people don't have sickle, people that are okay, usually hemoglobin is usually, above 11, 12. But if your hemoglobin drops down to 6 or 7, which it can happen if you have iron deficiency or if you're sickling quite a bit. And so therefore your oxygen carrying capacity decreases, and this decrease in oxygen can precipitate sickling crisis if you're deficient of iron. So yeah, and let's just take a young lady who is in the menstrual age, and she has sickling, but also she's losing iron with her bleeding each month, and if that isn't replenished, she has a double whammy going in terms of things that can affect her red blood cells and ultimately cause an increase in the number of sickling incidents that occur.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. There are so many questions coming in. Sure, go ahead, Mapu.
On the flip side of that, a lot of sickle cell patients are overloaded with iron, because one of the ways that we have been able to keep crises at bay, or in the case of my two daughters, prevent strokes, have been through blood transfusions. Well, if patients are getting simple transfusions where it's not more of an exchange, where they're taking blood from you and then giving you new donor blood cells, that can lead to iron overload, which a lot of sickle cell patients currently deal with. That can lead to organ damage and a whole host of complications too.
Wow. All right. Thank you. So informative. We're getting so many questions, and I thank people on both ends. We're getting tons of questions, but I have a question. What about gene editing therapy when it comes to sickle cell? I just want to throw that out there. And if anybody wants to tag along to it, I see two great smiling faces. So
I'm excited. Yeah. Okay. When I thought about us talking about this topic, I got excited, and I think the biggest smile should be on our guest's face and her babies, right? Because, some people think that myself and Dr. Mason are anti-drug companies. Now, we will give them a hard time, but I don't know that we're anti-drugs. My wife is on insulin, right? So I appreciate pharmaceutical companies and the people who do the research. So there's a company called Vertex Pharmaceuticals and another company called CRISPR-edited, and they, are working on using gene therapy to treat sickle cell patients and cure it potentially. So there was an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine that talked about it, and it appears from that research that there's the potential using gene therapy to cure the sickle cell, so that those painful crises and things like that go away. So this is recently published, I think in August. So it's very new. And the process is called EXA cell. And it's like this gene editing process, right? So imagine there's this enzyme. Of course, the company CRISPR-edited had to put their name in there. So they have this enzyme that they named CRISPR-Ca9. And this enzyme goes into the genes of a person with sickle cell and makes cuts. And the enzyme's goal is to target specific genes that allow stem cells to produce high levels of fetal hemoglobin. And fetal hemoglobin is important because you may ask, why don't the babies with sickle cell end up having sickle cell crises in utero, right? And that's because they have fetal hemoglobin and not hemoglobin A, which is adult. But when they're born, it converts over from one to the other. So imagine you have this CRISPR Ca9 that can then make this change, then converting your hemoglobin to fetal hemoglobin, which is the kind that doesn't really sickle. So how cool is that? So basically it's like a switch. It's like they do this work, they do the little switch, and all of a sudden now we're making more fetal hemoglobin. And with that model, they're finding that there's less of those vaso-occlusive, those complications that we think about, that pain, that risk for that chest syndrome. All of those things get much better by using technology. So everything that we learn about this is promising. There's always risk when you're starting to play around with genes, which is why people were freaking out about vaccines and things like that. There's always the risk that when they edit the genes, that there's a risk that there's some downstream effects. But the bigger risk, or the biggest concern I have, is going to be cost. Because when I learned about this and looked it up, it said that the therapy could cost as much as $2 million. Now, I don't know, I remember when we came up with a cure for hepatitis C, and it was probably in the $70,000 range, but it wasn't 2 million. So it's great news in that we may have technology to now potentially cure it or put it at a level where it doesn't cause symptoms, but there's going to be a cost issue, et cetera. So it's really exciting because we've never had anything like this. And I'll be honest, I thought when we first started, learning about chromosomes and genes years ago, particularly for cancer, I thought everything was going to be curable, right? And they're finding this more complicated than that for cancer, but because it mutates. But for this is a much more straightforward approach. And so I think that the good news is that we do have this treatment. I don't know how available it is yet. I know the research is being done and has been done, but I think it's starting to get to a point where it's going to be available to the public. So I don't know if our guest has any insights to that part.
I may have a little insight. Well, it has been approved in the UK, and it's looking very favorable here. Possibly within the next month, we may hear something really good. Yes. So it's such a hopeful moment for the sickle cell community. Of course, I am with you as far as the cost, how universal of a cure this is, but we're also very optimistic. As a family, it's a little bittersweet because my oldest daughter, who had the hip replacement, we actually did a consultation for gene therapy, not the vertex one, but she was denied. And the reason for that is, with any of these curative options, the patient has to go through so much, like chemotherapy and all of that. It's not as intense with gene therapy as it is with a bone marrow transplant, because with gene therapy, they're essentially implanting your stem cells back into you. So the chemo is not as aggressive, but they still have to prep the body and go through chemotherapy. And for my oldest daughter, she is considered hard to transfuse. And that is because during one of her blood maybe 1 or 2 blood transfusions, she picked up antibodies that over 99% of the population, the national population, has. So she can only take from less than 1%. And so for her, she's a high risk. But we are excited for the community. We know that there are so many advances happening in sickle cell, and we pray that, there will be some things that come along, whether it's manufacturing red blood cells in the labs, which I've heard of. We're hoping that other innovations will come along to help her. But this is a great news for the sickle cell community for sure.
What's the ages of your kids?
14, 18, and 19.
So just think about like, because when I just Googled what the cost would be to be a sickle cell patient,
Mm-hmm.
it ranged all the way on the low end, 6,000 a year annually cost, medical costs, all the way up to 63,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now let's go to the high end and we'll multiply 63,000
And
times.
you have to take us to the high end.
Right, right. So to me, although, and I don't want the cost to be 2 million, but what I'm saying is, and what happened with the hepatitis B is the costs have plummeted, right? So it's always high in the beginning. They're trying to recoup the cost of research, but at the end of the day, if it's going to cost me 60,000 a year to just live, then those numbers start to make sense, particularly as you start to think about the cost going down. So, and my experience has been, I was shocked that they were covering the hepatitis C. It was almost like once you went through the process of being approved, they just covered it. So I do believe that our society will value this enough to cover it. We just have to kind of fight for it and just give more people opportunities to be covered compared to the ones who are the more high risk people. But we're the whole panel and everybody that's checking out tonight. It's going to be a whole lot of prayers going up for you and your family, because I could only just raising 2 kids with technically no problems other than something in their head is hard enough. So I couldn't imagine what you've been through, and I really want to just celebrate you as a mom. There's some people. I just want to celebrate all moms. I want to be thankful for the holidays, because moms, the stuff that you guys do, not that we don't do our part, we do, but I just know what you've been through as a mom, what you've worried. I mean, just being able to sleep at night, worrying about your babies, right? So I want to applaud you for all you do.
Thank
The
you.
other thing I wanted to do too is to, on that same note, is how do you keep it together?
Mm.
No, no, I mean, and I'm not,
Yes.
I'm not being funny. I'm not. I mean, this is because I can imagine the toll this it has on you, and for moms and out there of other children who have sickle cell and what have you, just having to deal with how do you keep your children from feeling that they got punished somehow, or some of the things that may run through their minds.
Mhm.
How do you? And I know you just how you probably have an approach to it, but just to keep them feeling positive about themselves, that they had nothing to do with what's going on with them, and it's not their fault, and there's not you they didn't do something bad, or you didn't do something bad that created this outcome for them. So just just how do you keep them lifted up other than in prayer?
I think one of the biggest things that I've always encouraged the kids and been open to is having that mental health support. There are certain conversations that I understand, even as a mom. I am not the best person to have those conversations with. Certain fears with my kids, they're so very close. Maybe it's because they all share this condition, and so they feed off of each other. Oftentimes, Tuli is my oldest daughter. Oftentimes, her crises will be triggered by the fact that her sister is in the hospital, or something that has to do with maybe a procedure is coming up and she's concerned, but she really doesn't quite know how to ask questions or express that. So, very early on, I have always encouraged them to talk to psychology. When we go to the hospital, I will request psychology, especially if I know that something different is coming up, a procedure is coming up, so that they can speak to them in terms that they can understand and they can ask whatever questions that they may have. Um, but at my core is, and this may sound really odd, but there's a sense of gratitude that I feel because I'm originally from Liberia, that's West Africa. And I'm just grateful to be in a place, in a country where my kids have access to care. It's not always perfect. The sickle cell community, we've had to fight for everything. Um, we our patients still are not believed. There's a whole lot of mistrust in the medical system because patients, when they're in pain, they're made to feel like they're faking the pain or they're drug addicts. So we have all those issues. But at my core, I'm just so grateful that my kids were born in a country where we have access to care, and we utilize that. I, through the way that I advocate for them, I am praying that they are picking up these things so that they too can be their first advocates, to learn how to speak cordially with their medical team, knowing that this is a group decision and not something somebody's going to force on you. But it has to do with great communication. And I try to emulate that so that they themselves can see how it is that I am navigating their care, and they too can practice that when they become older. But at my core is that sense of gratitude. And so that helps me to just, we go through our issues and we get back to living life.
Thank you
I'm
so
just
much.
so grateful. If she's in pain, I can take her to the hospital. They take care of her. We go back to living life. And
Well,
that's basically it.
outstanding. Simply outstanding. Well, our time is drawing near, but there are a few things that we want to. First of all, Mapilla, I want to thank you for coming on. As always, I want to thank you for sharing. And our hour is drawing near, but I have a couple questions that I want to ask everyone on our panel. Well, Thanksgiving is Thursday, and we want to be very clear with our viewers about how Thursday. What are some good things to do? So I'm going to ask each of you, as you do your until next Monday, I want you to share the following: how to stay healthy, how not to get sick, and what we shouldn't do for Thursday. And I'm going to start with Dr. Mason.
I figured you would. Well, my Thanksgiving's been very different since I don't eat any animal flesh at all. So I do eat greens and things of that nature, but I think people should enjoy it in a way that is safe for them. I think people should be aware of what it is they're eating, but more importantly, why we're having this day. And for you, what does it mean for you and your family? And there's so many things, there's so many layers to that question. I can't get into them all, but I just want folks to begin to be a bit more reflective on that day, because we don't have to be here. None of us have to be here. And we should all be grateful for what every day we get in good health. And my prayers go out to our guests and her children and all the moms and dads that are dealing with some sort of problem, chronic problem with their children. And that the thing that we should be grateful for is that we are in a place, to your point, Mom, where you at least can get treatment and you at least can avail yourself, hopefully, of therapies that will give them a better life going forward.
Outstanding. Thank you so very much. Well, Doug, you're up next.
So, Nikki, I think is a great question. And there are two things I'd like to say. And one is, while it may not be that way in Chicago, this is flu season right now in the USA. And in the Deep South, the rates of hospitalization have doubled over the last week. So we're going to be being with other people. We're going to be socializing. So if you haven't had your flu shot or your COVID-19, it's a good time to get those vaccinations. The other thing I think about is, we're used to doing lots of things on Thanksgiving. And here's the opportunity to say to ourselves, well, maybe I should have more vegetables and less stuffing. Here's an opportunity to say, well, maybe I should have a smaller piece of pie instead of a bigger piece of pie. Now, I love the pumpkin pie. That's going to be a hard one for me. But here's the opportunity to kind of think about this and think, if we want to be healthy for Thanksgiving next year, this is the time to start making the changes.
All right, Doug. Outstanding. Thank you so very much. Well, Maya, you're next.
Mrs. Donna, I want to thank you for coming on here and educating us, sharing your story. Thank you for the work you do. I heard there was some, caregiver kind of groups. I hope you are, I love therapy for everyone in the family, love support for everyone in the family. I send you any support energetically that I can and how you receive it. What do I want people to do for Thanksgiving? Wash your hands, get the thumb. Wash your hands, get the thumb. Not after you eat, before and after you eat. That's it. See you next Monday.
Okay. All right, wash them hands. That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Miller, you're up next.
Well, I think that we should remember the spirit and the reasoning and what this holiday really is about is being thankful. And even though there are a lot of things that we're dealing with that are very trying, the fact that we still are here and still have opportunity to make improvements in lives and in the health of our community, and we should be thankful for that. And I think that if we spend more time dealing with the real reason, then we'll be less concerned about overeating and those things. So coming together as family, seeing each other that maybe we don't get a chance to see each other as often. Let us enjoy each other, and let us be thankful that we have each other. And let us not come together and the only enjoyment that we have is the dinner, because there's something that is more important than the food on Thanksgiving. And that's what this whole holiday is about, being thankful for what we've been able to receive and that we made it to this point, because there's a whole bunch of folks over the past few years that didn't make it. And, I'll too mention the fact that COVID is on the rise, not just in the South, even in Chicago. I read something that I think it's up like 17%, and there's still people dying every day. And I think the average is at least one death a day in Chicago. So let us not forget that, and let us be careful with that. And if you're at risk, make sure that you protect yourself the best that you can.
Outstanding. Thank you so very much. Well, Tony, the ball is in your court.
Well, thank you. Every time, first of all, I want to thank you, Nikki. I can't remember when you invited me to this platform the first time, but you got me trapped now, so I'm happy. There goes my Monday nights, right? So I appreciate you. I'm just grateful that you and Dr. Pete invited me. And it's so funny, you'll put this animal-based carnivore next to this vegan guy, and I think that's always fun that we're like right next to each other on these live streams. So for those who are who follow me, because I share this on my YouTube channel, it's so nice. I'm grateful that I can share this platform with an animal-based doctor like myself and more of a vegan doc like Dr. Mason. And I'm glad he tolerates me, and I just want to say that I love him, appreciate that we can actually go back and forth. For those who are celebrating Thanksgiving, who are more animal-based, if you're, some people will have an indulgence day. And if you feel it's safe to do that, feel free to do that. Get back on track afterwards. For those who can't do that, let's do some meat without the barbecue sauce. There's, you can have some greens. You can have those green beans. You can have the cauliflower mac and cheese. If you haven't tried it, it works really well. And a lasagna, Maria Emmerich has a great recipe for lasagna that doesn't have all of that stuff as well. So I looked up our guest's name. Is it pronounced Mapilla? So Mapilla, right? I looked it up, and you know what it said? It said that name represents a powerhouse. Someone with confidence and strength. So when we think about what you represent to your family, all of that makes plenty of sense. So I'm really also grateful that you were on this platform tonight, because that platform allowed us to talk about a topic and introduce gene therapy for so many people that's going to provide hope. So I'm grateful for that. And I just think everybody being grateful and thankful, because it's contagious. And if I'm around people who are grateful and thankful, then the person next to me is going to get that way. So it's like the butterfly effect. So everybody, as you celebrate Thanksgiving, even with those crazy relatives who you know crazy, and they're going to be crazy on that day. You find something in them that's positive. Everybody has something good about them, and you lift that up and you focus on what's good, and that'll make that crazy be less obvious. So enjoy your day. No time for negativity. And I just want to thank all you guys for this platform and opportunity to be with you guys.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Every good in them. All right. Well, I'm a research that. Thank you. Mapilla,
Yes.
you're up. You're up.
Yeah, I think we can all, let's be reminded to stay hydrated. Definitely the sickle cell warriors, but I think we can all benefit from being a little more hydrated. And whatever it is we eat, to do so in moderation. And I am just grateful for another curative option coming on the market for sickle cell disease. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get that approval on Thanksgiving Day? I am hopeful for that. So thank you guys so much for having me. Absolutely.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, there are a few things that I want to share. First of all, the congressman, that meeting has went over and he's been trying to get here to get to us, but he just wants to tell everybody thank you for being here and thank you for being a part. And he's excited over what is happening with these breakthroughs. Sometimes people don't understand all the levels of government. And as the federal government, we are responsible for all 50 states. And we work with those in all 50 states. So this is exciting to see this happen, to see how many lives we may be able to impact. Mapilla, my arms are stretched all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, where you are, and I am hugging you and telling you thank you. So I am so grateful for you. I have enjoyed these last working with you because you have stayed true to your name and your mission with your foundation. And your mission is, and a lot of people may not know, it's a mother with a mission. And that mother with a mission, Miss Mapilla, is a warrior. And I actually have a warrior sweatshirt. If I had known we was going to actually talk about sickle cell tonight, I would have my warrior sweatshirt on because I appreciate all the hard work that you do. And I am thanking you. I really am. My thoughts of what everybody should eat for Thursday. Let me share. Do not eat undercooked turkey. Showing up in anyone's emergency room eating undercooked meat. So make sure that the turkey is done. If that little piece in that turkey, that pop-up thing that's supposed to tell you that your turkey is done and it pops up, the turkey still isn't at the right temperature and isn't looking right, it's okay to have blackened turkey. And I'm not just talking about seasoning. Make sure that that bird is completely done. Please do not stuff the turkey before it is done. Make sure that we cook all this in moderation, eat and cook it properly because we don't want anybody getting sick. Am I correct, Dr. Miller? For the cooks on the call, we want you are healthy. Please do not eat anything. We don't want you to eat anything wrong. Do not eat anything wrong. We do not want you in the emergency room poisoned. So please don't do that. And do please remember to eat in moderation. The last thing you can do is show up at the emergency room thinking you're having a heart attack. And it's really just because you have indigestion, because you ate too fast or you ate too much. They're leftovers, and leftovers are better. They taste better the next day because they've marinated some. So save room for Friday. That's what I want you to do. Save some room for Friday. What are some of the things that I'm thankful for? Well, of course, you know that I'm thankful for Mapilla. But if I don't say it, I actually am so thankful for each and every one of you here today. I love you all in all of our special ways. I am thankful and grateful. And I just admire all the great work that you all do. Dr. Mason, Dr. Graham, Dr. Maya, Dr. Tony, and Dr. Miller, all of you are simply fantastic. And I like to give people their flowers while they're here. So I want you to know that I am thankful for each and every one of you. And you guys do great work, and Godspeed to you all. Want to remind everybody to make sure that you get all of your vaccines. Don't forget the newest COVID vaccine. Let's be safe. If you can tolerate and take flu vaccines, please do so. Don't forget your pneumonia, everything that you need to extend your life. And remember to be healthy. This week, actually last week, I was channeling my Dr. Terry Mason, because people were saying that they were dieting before Thanksgiving so they could prepare for the food. And I said, oh, diet, that means to die. You have to do livids. That's what's most important. Good night, everyone. Have a great one. Take care. Until next Monday.